and welcome to Diabetes Connections in the News. I'm Stacey Sims. These are the top diabetes stories and headlines happening now. In the News is brought to you by Edgepark. Simplify your diabetes journey with Edgepark. Lots of news out of the EASD conference, that is the European Association for the Study of Diabetes, happening this week. I'm going to run through some of them, but I'm sure more will be coming out in the next few days. A new trial finds that antiviral medication, when given soon after a child is diagnosed with type 1, might help preserve beta cells. This team followed 96 children aged 6 to 15 who were all diagnosed with type 1 within 3 weeks prior to their enrollment in the study. After 1 year of follow-up, the researchers found that C-peptide levels remained significantly higher in kids who'd gotten the antiviral treatment compared to those who had not. On top of that, 86% of kids who'd gotten the antivirals still produced their own insulin at a level that made treatment with supplementary insulin easier, the team said, and is also known to be linked to lowered risk for diabetes complications. The treatment appeared to be safe, no severe side effects noted. This team says further studies should be done. Also at EASD, an update on once-a-week insulin icodec for the treatment of type 1. Several other studies have investigated once-weekly insulins for people with type 2. This was the first data to be presented from a large-scale phase 3 study in type 1. This included 582 people, average age 44 years old, average diabetes duration of 20 years. Everybody in the study received basal insulin in combination with mealtime insulin over a period of 57 weeks. One group got the once-weekly basal, the other daily. Overall, very similar reductions in A1C, about half a point drop in everybody. The once-weekly insulin, though, did lead to higher rates of hypoglycemia, so researchers are still investigating that. Vertex Pharmaceuticals says a third type 1 patient no longer needs insulin after its investigational stem cell-derived therapy. 2 patients who had been followed for at least 12 months met the study's endpoint of the elimination of serious hypoglycemic events. The first patient no longer needed insulin 270 days into treatment, lasting through 24 months of follow-up and still ongoing. That patient had type 1 for nearly 42 years. The second patient came off of insulin on day 180 and maintained that for 1 year. This patient had to restart insulin treatment at month 15, though at a much lower daily dose of only 4 units. And the third patient stopped needing insulin at 180 days. These patients are now capable of making their own insulin, but they need to be on an immunosuppressive regimen. Vertex is also testing an investigational therapy that encapsulates stem cells so that people do not need to take the immunosuppressive therapies. I mentioned some of Dexcom's presentations at EASD in our long-format interview earlier this week. Other studies presented. Dexcom 1 for people with type 2 saw their average A1C drop from over 10 to 8.5 over 3 months. Dexcom 1 has a, quote, more simplified interface compared to the flagship G-series sensors. Another study verified the use of G7 sensors in pregnant women with type 1, type 2, or gestational diabetes. Dexcom says this means the G6 and G7 are the only commercially available CGMs backed by clinical data for use during pregnancy. Dexcom also said that the G7 will be available for Tandem's t:slim X2 insulin pump in the U.S. and multiple markets across Europe and Asia-Pacific before the end of the year. We are waiting still to hear from Tandem about when their pumps will work with G7. Also for women with gestational diabetes, it looks like metformin may lengthen the time they can go until they need to use insulin. This was also at EASD and published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. The metformin group had a lower mean fasting glucose at 32 and 38 weeks, and the babies had a lower mean birth weight than those whose moms received the placebo. More voices are calling for more screening for type 1 diabetes. About 85% of people with type 1 have no family history. A lot of research programs going on worldwide to establish the best ways of implementing universal screening, including programs in Germany, the US, Israel, UK, Australia, multiple new European countries, including the UK, Germany, Poland, Portugal, Italy, and the Czech Republic. These researchers say screening for adults who can also develop type 1 is less well studied, but this population could also benefit from early stage identification. Back to the headlines in just a minute, but first in the news is brought to you by Edgepark. And you've worked hard your whole life. Diabetes management shouldn't slow you down. Edgepark is your trusted go-to supplier for all things diabetes management supplies and continuous glucose monitors like Medtronic's Guardian sensor, Dexcom G7, and the Freestyle Libre 3. Edgepark accepts most insurance plans, including select coverage for Medicare and Medicare Advantage plans. And Edgepark navigates insurance complexities for you and handles the paperwork. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Edgepark logo. New guidelines for CGM guidance for use in schools from the American Diabetes Association. The guidelines say the use of CGMs by students with diabetes has increased dramatically in recent years. Over 50% of children with type 1 under the age of 18 have adopted this technology, and these numbers continue to rise as the technology becomes more accessible, easier to use, and further reduces disease burden. These guidelines are very important because a school cannot prohibit the use of a CGM if it is ordered by the Diabetes Medical Management Plan or provider's orders. I'm going to link up the guidelines in the show notes. There's a lot here, including recommendations for school nurses who plan to remotely monitor a student's CGM on a separate device than that provided by the school. And good luck to Lauren Dahlin, who is running and swimming and biking in the incredible Ironman event happening, the World Championship in Kona, Hawaii. Now, this happens next weekend, October 14th. She qualified after the annual Ironman in Lake Placid. Dahlin was diagnosed with type 1 in 2017 at the age of 26. She's already done 9 Ironman races, but she's one of the first women with T1D to qualify for this big one, the Ironman in Hawaii. I actually talked about her a couple of years ago because her story is just bananas, although I guess it's not that unusual. She wound up in the emergency room after 6 different providers miffed on her diagnosis. They even performed a full blood panel workup and didn't diagnose her appropriately. She was in DKA and spent 10 days in intensive care. 1 month later, she signed up for her first half marathon. Good luck, Lauren. We are all cheering for you. On the podcast next week, we're going to talk about The Cost, a type 1 diabetes thriller short film. I talked to the folks behind this campaign, all about the movie, why they're making it, but we also got into a really good discussion about following your dreams when you know you need health insurance. It was a really interesting show. We're going to have that for you next week. The past episode is with Dexcom. I talked to Jake Leach, the Chief Operating Officer from EASD, all about what they're presenting there. And he answered a bunch of the questions that you had sent in that had nothing to do with the current studies they were presenting. That's always great. That's in the news for this week. If you like it, please share it. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you back here soon.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.